Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a journal or notebook using vinyl record covers. This project uses the Coptic stitch binding method, so if you want to skip straight to the binding, you can jump to. In this tutorial, I'll go over everything from cover pages, creating your signature, sewing the bind, and finalizing your notebook. I love the way Coptic stitching keeps the thread visible and allows you to get really creative and play around with design. To get started, you'll need 28 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. I got mine off of Amazon. It's just recycled printer paper. I can leave the link below. You'll also need a vinyl record cover. Try to use one that is already damaged so you're not wasting anything valuable. A needle. I do recommend a rounder needle for this project, but straight is okay too. They don't have to be binder's needles as long as they're wide enough at the opening for the thread and not too pointy at the end so you don't hurt yourself. Some thread to bind with. I'm just using craft thread. An awl to pierce your holes or a needle. An X-Acto knife or scissors, a ruler, a bone folder, although any straight edge works as well, and a cutting mat or any soft surface. First, we're going to start by making the cover pages. Cut the cover so that it's easier to work one layer at a time. Next, I took a board that was 8.5 by 5.5 and traced out my front cover. You could also do this just by marking it with a ruler. And then I cut it out with an X-Acto knife. And then I used the front cover to trace out the back cover. I did this because I wanted them to be perfectly equal. And now you have two even cover pages. And now we can move on to the signatures. So the first thing you want to do is wash your hands. When you're working with white paper, things get really dirty and show up very easily. So pull out your white paper and one at a time just grab each sheet and fold it in half with the short sides touching. And then you can run it across with a bone folder or any straight edge that you have to make sure it's nice and folded. Now is a really good time to throw on a podcast or some music, or in my case, a lecture that I should be listening to instead of filming this video. Once this is done, you're going to make your signatures. So start by grabbing two pieces of paper and just put one inside of the other, just like I'm doing here. And then do this for two more sheets of paper so that you have signatures of 4. Since we have 28 sheets of paper and each signature is 4 pages, you should end up with 7 signatures. If you're using a thicker paper, you might notice that your edges aren't totally flush. One way you can fix this is by using a X-Acto knife and a ruler or a paper cutter like I did here. This is not necessary, just if you want that super flush effect in the end. And now you're going to mark your holes. So grab your top signature and make a center mark. And then you're going to make 3 marks on either side that are 1 inch away. So in the end, you should end up with 7 marks that are all 1 inch apart on the edge of your signature. Then you're going to grab your stack of signatures and try to get it as aligned as possible. So I just used a ruler or any straight edge. Gently press down on your stack of signatures and line your ruler or your straight edge up 90 degrees. Run your pencil through each signature to make sure every single signature has an equally marked hole. Now you're going to pierce your holes. So one signature at a time, lay it flat with the spine up and pierce through each mark that you made. Make sure you keep the signatures in the same order by placing them on top of each other once they're finished. And now we're going to pierce our covers. Start by taking the front cover and place the signature on top, marking each of the dots about ½ an inch from the edge. Then go through with an awl and make points. Then go through on the right side and pierce a hole big enough to fit your needle through. Now grab your back cover and make sure it's lined up the right way. Place it on top as equal as you can get with the front cover. Go through with an awl and pierce through each of the holes. Then go through on the right side and make a hole about the same width as you made the front covers, thick enough to fit the needle through. Now we're ready for binding. For this project, I used a gold thread to match the detailing on my record. You can use any thread you'd like as long as it fits through the needle and it's sturdy enough to hold the book together. To calculate how much thread you're going to need, take the length of your spine times the number of signatures plus 1. So here I had 7 signatures, so I need the length of the spine times 8. To help the thread run smoother when binding, I like to run the whole thread through a lip chap or any wax that I have on hand to avoid any tangles and just make it a bit easier when binding. This is not a necessary step, just something I found to help out. Next, you're going to thread your needle as I've effortlessly done here on my first cake. And tie a knot on the other end. If you're using a thinner thread, make sure you do a double knot. And now it's time to bind. I do recommend having a binder, a book, or the edge of a table to work on. So just place everything upside down and grab your bottom cover and the first signature. And thread the needle through the uppermost hole inside of your signature, pulling the thread gently until it reaches the knot. Then thread the needle up through the first cover hole, always working on the right side of the thread. And now take the needle through the loop that you just made, always working in the direction that you're binding. And then thread the needle back through the signature. Continue this method for each hole of the signature. For each stitch, make sure you look back to make sure there's no tangles. When you get to your last hole, stitch as normally, but instead of threading it back through the signature, thread it through the next signature's hole. Now we're going to stitch back the other way. Put the needle through the next hole and wrap it around the previous stitch in the direction that you're binding, so right to left this time. And back through the hole you came from. Continue this method for the whole second signature. Once again, when you're on your last hole, stitch normally and run the thread back through the next signature. For the following signatures, continue the same method, always looping the previous signature stitch, always in the direction that you're binding. This is where a rounded needle would come in handy to grab the previous signature stitch without having to flip through the pages. Once again, here's a close-up of what it looks like in later signatures. Here I'm working left to right and I'm always looping under the previous stitch. When you get to your final signature, grab the front cover as well because we're going to bind them both at the same time. Bring the needle through the top hole of your cover, pulling it on the right side, and then looping through the previous stitch, again left to right. Now you're going to put it through the hole of the new signature. The rest are going to look a little bit different, so bring it through the hole as normal. Loop it around the previous stitch as normal. Thread it through the cover hole up to down. Loop another stitch around the stitch that you just made, and bring it back through the signature hole. Continue this method for the rest of the stitches on the cover. Your last stitch is going to be done just as normal, but once you get inside, make sure you loop it around and tie a little knot at the end. Then you can tuck the little thread through a couple times so it twists and cut off the end. And now you're done. Now you have your very own vinyl record cover notebook. I love how thrifty this idea is, and I'm happy to have found a way to upcycle damaged or unwanted records. You can definitely play around with different stitching methods, threads, materials, and designs, but I hope this tutorial was interesting to watch or has inspired you to make one of your own. Stay tuned for more sustainable DIYs and crafts, and don't forget to subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.